Hey everyone! Thank you for joining us for our next Learn Live session, Identify and Mitigate AI Data Security Risks. My name is Anna. I'm an event planner for Reactor, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our Code of Conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Microsoft Reactor channel. With that, I'd love to turn it over to our presenters for today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Anna, and welcome everyone to our last session of this series. I have with me Max. So my name is Sophie. I'm a senior product manager at Microsoft for Purview to secure and govern AI. Max, do you want to say hi?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us again. Third session already. My name is Max Bombardier. I'm also a product manager helping a customer realize value with their Purview investment and helping you make all organization more secure with data security risks.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this last and final series where we're going to focus on our newest product, so DSPM for AI, to identify and mitigate AI data security risks. All right, let's look at the agenda. We have a full packed agenda today. So we're going to talk a little bit about what are some of the AI risks that we're seeing with our customers and our partners. And then we'll go right to an overview of our DSPM for AI solution. We'll talk about, before you deploy Microsoft 365 Copilot, how you can use our data risk assessment to detect oversharing risk. And then we're going to recap some of the sessions that we did prior, for the last 2 weeks. So we're going to go over it with in combination, right? How we can secure and govern Microsoft 365 Copilot, ChatGPT Enterprise, and other AI apps with DSPM for AI. All right, Max, are you ready?
Yes, it's a very packed agenda, so bear with us. There's a lot of good content there.
Let's get started. All right, so first let's talk about the top concerns that we're hearing from our customers and partners like you. So hopefully none of this is, hopefully you've seen this before and you've heard this before, either from your own end users or your own organizations or your customers. So the top concern is oversharing. This is data oversharing and data leaks, and how we differentiate that is data oversharing is internal within your organization, and data leaks would be external, so leaking that to another AI application outside the boundary of your organization. And then, yeah, go ahead, Max.
Yeah, definitely surfacing. I mean, oversharing's been a concern, top of mind for a long time, but just the use of AI and the ease of using AI to surface that information has been definitely top of mind.
Yeah. And then, once we're interacting with AI, a lot of customers like you have also raised the risk of being able to identify risky AI usage. So, we talked about this last week and the week prior, right? Potential jailbreak happening, potential inappropriate messaging happening with your AI application. So being able to identify where AI potentially gave you sensitive info as a response, or you're prompting AI for sensitive info, that's all included in the identification of risky AI usage.
Yeah, very similarly to previous point. I mean, just trying to keep digging with the AI to figure out ways to get to information you didn't know you had access to and surfacing what you shouldn't have access to.
Exactly. And then last but not least, and we covered this in our last session on data compliance, right? Data where there is now increased regulations in AI, and customers are asking, how can I make sure that I am adhering to new regulations and policies within my organization? And so all about AI governance and risk visibility. So being able to audit those prompts and responses and showing the visibility to all the interactions with AI. All right. So I actually got a refresh of this slide, so it looks
I
super nice.
know
So
it's
we
pretty
always
this week.
start with this slide. So Max, do you want to again give a very quick, brief overview of the Purview product?
Sure, and in good step for today. I mean, if you already have Purview, you can already leverage any of these capabilities as we expand towards AI protections. But when we think of Purview, think of this as a platform. It's a suite of solution that is interconnected. So what three main pillars of that being data security, data governance, and data compliance, which is not only for M365, but also beyond that. The construct of M365, so going beyond for multi-cloud in context for today, non M365 Copilot, for example, other types of AI. And really thinking of when we look at this, it's one place to configure. It's one place for visibility. Audits and activities are all in one area. So when you start digging into your posture and you try to look into what's happening, not just for AI, but for regular data, and the two of them combined, it's a great advantage that you have. And it's a bit of the same thing as we had in the security world when we think about this, and now expanding on data security. That single panel to look at all the risks, regardless and across your data, instead of just pillar per pillar or solution per solution, is truly beneficial for organization to quickly address risks, get those policies, and we'll talk through data security posture management for AI and how that quickly can address across the list of solutions we got here. So really some amazing value across the three main pillars of Purview.
Absolutely. And so with today, our focus on securing and governing AI, we're still using the same, right? So when we were talking about, back in the day, securing files in SharePoint or your emails in Exchange, it's still about data. And now that data, when we're talking about securing and governing AI, are the interactions with AI. So the prompts and or responses, right, with AI. So we follow the same, and hopefully this is, again, not new to you, right? So we always start with discovering. So we discover the data so that we can protect it, and then we can govern it. So with AI, we're discovering the interaction, the AI risk, we're protecting against those AI risks, and then we're governing and adhering to regulation. So you will hear us talk about discover, protect, and govern over and over throughout our session today, and the policies that we would recommend you to create from DSPM for AI to discover, protect, and govern AI.
Yep, that's right. I mean, very similar pattern, same thing that many years ago when we introduced IM or instant messaging, and then the need for this, policies that are put in place across. It's just a different type of data, but the same constructs should apply, and they are.
Mm-hmm. So Max, right, you showed we have data compliance, data security, data governance solutions, and we utilize features within all of those solutions, right? So from MIP, DLP-IRM to CC, DLM, e-discovery, compliance manager, and audit to discover, protect, and govern AI. And so the three different types of AI that we support are Microsoft Copilot experiences. So this includes Microsoft 365 Copilot. And then we also secure and govern enterprise AI. That includes ChatGPT Enterprise. And then all other AI, as we mentioned before, that's all the consumer AI products that you can access through a web browser. So what our customer have said is that, there is a lot of place for me to go to set up all these policies to secure and govern AI, right? You have to go to MIP to set up the sensitivity labels, go to DLP to set up the DLP policies. Is there a place, for us to do that in a one-stop shop? And that is why we have developed this solution. So data security posture management for AI in Microsoft Purview, where it is a centralized place to give you that visibility to discover, to protect, and to govern your AI interactions in one place. So you can manage, to create, and review all the policies that you've created in your tenant to secure and govern AI.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at this. When we think of DSPM at that single layer, so discoverability is great, and where we can expand a bit further, M365 Copilot being a first party, we do have a bit more control. And when I think of architects looking at this between enterprise AI, M365 Copilot, and other AIs, there's different patterns on how we can protect and what we can protect at each layer. So what's great here is, yes, single pane view across, but also for setting up policies through integrations that we have with enterprise AI. So great one place to be.
Exactly. So we will walk through how to use DSPM for AI today to help you secure and govern all those 3 types of AI. But first, let's talk a little bit about permissions. So you definitely need the right permissions to access DSPM for AI inside the Microsoft Purview portal. So we do have a 3 sets of roles that will help allow you to view, create, and edit all the policies in DSPM for AI. And we also have a view only role, which is the Microsoft Purview security reader role group. So make sure you have the right permissions. There is obviously also licensing to DSPM for AI. So I will call out that we have a both E3 level version of DSPM for AI, as well as an E5 level version of DSPM for AI. So
I think the beautiful part here is, if you have any of these licenses, you already have this capability. So nothing else to install. I think there's the extension for some of the signals we'll discuss quickly in terms of requirements, but very simple sets of requirements. And just by setting up permissions, if you haven't already, then you'll be able to get visibility instantly.
Absolutely. So we're actually going to start today's session or today's journey in securing Microsoft 365 Copilot. However, before we go ahead and secure the prompts and responses of Microsoft 365 Copilot, we want to talk a little about oversharing, right? So Max, as we talked at the beginning, there were 3 top concerns from our customers, right? Risk and concerns, and oversharing was the top one. So let's talk a little bit about how we can help you address oversharing with Microsoft Purview DSPM for AI. So we do have a blog that just went live yesterday that talks about how you can use Purview data risk assessment to address oversharing, but we'll go through that in detail today as well.
Yeah, it's a good call out. And I think, when we think of oversharing, I think we have to look at, is this an internal oversharing and external oversharing, and they have different patterns on how do we solve this. So we'll dig a little bit deeper on that, how to solve both with you.
Perfect. So this specific tool, right, the DSPM data risk assessment tool, which is part of DSPM for AI, is aimed at addressing the oversharing that may have already happened in your SharePoint and OneDrive environment. So I do want to call that as a caveat. And we talk about that as a support tool for your Microsoft 365 Copilot deployment, is because Microsoft 365 Copilot respects the boundary of your tenants, so the files in your SharePoint and OneDrive, and therefore to help address oversharing in OneDrive and SharePoint, it will also help with your Microsoft 365 deployment as well.
Yeah, that's right. And when I think of the boundaries, I mean the permission that M365 Copilot, it will only leverage what you have access to. Now, the traditional challenge that we had over the years is maybe some of the security hygiene from the early days of collaboration might have been a little bit too open. Whether it was, public SharePoint, and I mean public in the context of the organization, of course, not external, but it's still places and sites that existed, may still exist, where the content was just simply too shared. So.
For sure. Yeah. So we see this as an opportunity as well, right? So it is a concern, yes, but we also see this as an opportunity for you to help address this concern. So if oversharing risks aren't addressed, they could lead to access to information beyond what the user needs for their role, inappropriate sharing of content, and also out of date data and irrelevant responses from Microsoft 365 Copilot. So we understand oversharing, sometimes it naturally happens with collaboration because we do want people to be productive. We want people to share content and collaborate and work on this content together. But oversharing happens when that content is shared beyond what it was meant to be shared.
Yeah. And what's going to be good with the content as we dig into it is looking at how do we sort of close a door that may have been left open, but also how to address it continuously to make it better so that you have the better settings available to you today. And I do want to call out one of the last item that you had just before, because what's interesting here is something may have been overshared in the past, but not a security risk anymore. But because we haven't had a proper life cycle process around, then it's being reused and out of context in this case, where as part of a response, and that's also something you want to prevent. So it's not yet necessarily a data security risk all the time. It's just oversharing and using the proper information.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about the common causes of oversharing. And I know there probably will be other causes beyond these, but I have identified 5 very common causes of oversharing. So the first one is when sites are set to public. It doesn't mean you should never have public sites. I'm sure there are sites that are meant to be public, but if your sites are always created as public by default, then anyone in your organization will have access to all the content in those sites. And so when they ask Copilot questions, Copilot could potentially return responses from those sites where sensitive information may be stored. So we would recommend you set your default to private. So that's the first one. And then the second one, when we're talking about item level, so when you're sharing a file or document for a collaboration, if your default sharing option is everyone, then that could, again, potentially cause oversharing. So instead, you could use I believe it's called everyone internal. So for us in Microsoft, it's called Microsoft, internal users, as well as specific users that you identify.
That's right.
And the third one is broken permission inheritance. So this may happen, it may happen when you break inheritance from a site, from a library, or from an item level, or even a folder level within a library. And it may not have happened, because the person wanted to overshare, but perhaps they wanted to share a file specifically for collaboration with this group of users. But as that file goes through its drafting process, the people who should not have access to the final product has never been removed. And so broken permission inheritance, again, could potentially cause oversharing in your tenant.
And it makes it harder to manage as well. So just overall, and I think, just a good hygiene to keep it in check. So where the reporting can help you is identify all of those.
Absolutely. The fourth one is use of everyone except external user domain group. This domain group is only available if your site is set to public. So again, if you have your site privacy set to private as default, that will cover this concern. And then last but not least, I think, Max, you have a lot of thought on this one, which is sites and files without sensitivity labels. Do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, and a couple maybe, and also recap across. But when I think of sensitivity label at the site level, it's all about protecting, the container. Think of it as I want to prevent guests. I can even configure it to private and public automatically. So it's something common to users. If I say it's confidential for all employees, well, automatically it should say no guest sharing. So that's going to help you quickly set up a standard across the organization. And when we think of the file labeling, and to be clear here, we're not saying you need file labels across or sensitivity labels across all files for your organization tomorrow. And you can certainly start leveraging M365 Copilot before that, but it's an added layer of protection. So in context that if the first layer on top, if I take site privacy as set to public, but a file has been labeled for a specific program that has, 20 people have access to this file. Well, no matter what, even if it's on a public site, the information will be restricted to only the 20 people that have access to that label. So I just think of it as a layered approach across the board. And I also wanted a quick call out on the default sharing option, the second one that we talked about. What's interesting here is how the file is shared or how that link is shared, because in some of the forums, if we share this on across a meeting and we just paste that link, it makes it available across everyone in that meeting as well. So when we think of that nuance between people in Contoso versus specific people, it's a truly powerful differences, even though they can all collaborate equally.
Yeah, I love that, Max. Yeah. So I think, for those that are listening, if you want to share your concerns, or if you think of other ways that may have caused oversharing in your tenant, feel free to share that with us. So let's take a look at Purview DSPM for AI data risk assessment and how that can help you address oversharing. So we're here in the Microsoft Purview portal. Again, this is the combined portal where we combine all three solutions, right? Our data security, data compliance, and data governance solution in one. And we'll find DSPM for AI either in the solutions tab or right on the side panel there. So once you land in DSPM for AI, you will see data risk assessment reports at the bottom of your navigation under DSPM for AI. So let's go ahead and head there. All right, so there are two types of assessments here. There is the default assessment, which is highlighted in that circle there in the view details. That has just GA'd, so super exciting. But there is also an option to create a custom assessment that is currently still in public preview, where you can identify the sites and the users that you want to run the report for. So for our session today, we're going to focus on the default assessment that is run every single week, so once a week. And it will assess oversharing of sensitive data for the top 100 SharePoint sites based on how many times the sites are accessed by your users. All right, so we can go ahead and click on that view details and we will land in the default assessment for the week that you're currently in. So there is a note at the top, right? So based on changes that may have happened because different sites are accessed differently every week, this report may cover different sites each week. So just a call out. At the top, we have a graphic representation of all the content that was scanned that week and the information about it. So this is not specific to a specific site in your tenant, but overall for this default assessment, how much content was scanned and all the information there. So what I really want to call out here, because we're talking about oversharing, right? So the first little, I guess that's a circle chart. I always forget the name.
So.
Circle chart there called total items. So what we're looking at here is how many of your total items are actually scanned for sensitive info types. So I'll call that SITs going forward. And how much of that is not scanned. So my demo tenant, this is looking really good. All of our content is currently scanned. If it's not scanned, then you may have potential oversharing happening because it's not scanned for SITs and potentially you wouldn't have the right policy applied there for those content, or those content are unsupported files for scanning. Right, Max?
Yeah, and I'm going to add a quick call out to nuance the SITs or sensitive info type versus sensitivity label, because there's been clarification needed about this by customers. When we think of sensitive info types, and by the way, we have built-in classification. If there's DLP policies for emails and devices, we're scanning all the files and emails. SharePoint and OneDrive files are always classified as well. When we think of classification as opposed to other systems, again, we're always classifying when information is sent or modified. That classification or these SITs will be, well, I've found credit card numbers. I found like these sensitive info types. So when we think of the, green and mustard color that we have on the chart right now, we think of we found sensitive information or we have not found sensitive information. So this is all about identifying what's in the content. Sensitivity labels, on the other hand, are all about how do you want to protect this. So a label is a organizational tag. It's in our examples, confidential, all employees, or highly confidential. Think of it as it's defining the protection. It's not necessarily about identifying the data. That's what we have SITs for, that we're already classifying. And then we can use that classification to automatically label, for example, files. So there's multiple mechanisms for labeling. Well, we can talk about that a little bit later, and we have the blueprints to help. But think of it as, SITs are all about identifying what is sensitive in the content. Label is about the protection applied.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Especially now we're, right beside the circle chart, we have the bar chart, which is the sensitivity labels on data, right? Not the SITs, for the sensitive. And what we're looking here is how much of your content is labeled with a sensitivity label and how much is not labeled. And specifically honing in on the content that is not labeled but contain sensitive information types, right? So
That's
that
right.
combination is really what we're looking at where potential oversharing may have happened.
Yep, and that's correct because that label is an anchor. We can leverage it in data loss prevention. We can have protection within the file itself as well and in the email. And so very good indicator that it is something more sensitive to you. So if it is not labeled and contains sensitive information, it's a really good indicator. But also the one
Exactly.
on the right, the item shared with is also very, very interesting when we think
Yes.
about what's the hygiene of sharing links if they're not blocked, if you're not preventing it to only specific people, for example. It's a good way to understand how people are sharing.
Exactly. So yeah, last on the right side, the blue bar chart there helps you understand how your content is being shared, right? So if I'm seeing a lot of content that's shared with either anyone or people outside of your organization, oversharing may have happened. So looking through the top chart, that gives you a general idea of what's the health overall for your content. And then we can dive a little bit deeper underneath. So this is the list of the actual SharePoint sites and OneDrive sites that we've scanned and what is happening there. So this is a chart where what you're looking for, there's a few, again, key things to look for if oversharing has happened. So based on your knowledge of whether this site is supposed to be public or private, if you see a private site having, hundreds and thousands of users accessing, then an oversharing may have happened, right? And or if you see a private site where the item is shared with people outside of your organization or anyone, then again, potentially oversharing may have happened. So as you look through this site list, you can identify if there is a site that may have had oversharing happening. So we're looking at this one, right? Sales and marketing site. It has 19 items in the site, so very minimal amount of content, but we know this is supposed to be a private site for the sales and marketing team. But what we notice, based on what we see here in the overview tab, once you click into that site, is that majority of the content is not labeled. And not only that it's not labeled, it actually contains SITs, right? So we have potential oversharing that may have happened in your site. So now that we've identified sites that may have oversharing, the next steps is how do we remediate it, right? So let's look at the identify tab. So that was the overview tab. So now we're in the identify tab. So this is the tab for our new feature, the on-demand classification, right, Max?
Yep.
Right. So this is looking good because all of our content is actually scanned, but let's pretend none of it's scanned. So what can we do with this on-demand classification?
Yeah, and then that's a good call out. So in the bad classification is all about, I talked about automatic classification, and whenever a file is touched, we're going to reclassify for any newer sets, for example. A case where documents would not be scanned would have been prior, like early, talking like 2015-ish era time where files were imported before we had a classification engine. So talking very, very long ago, if the files were not touched. In more frequent scenario, it's all about, what about if I want to classify or reclassify for newer sits that we've added since? And I'm like, could be a custom sit that you've created last week, for example, and you want to reclassify that very important site, sales and marketing in context, to say, I want to reclassify so that it finds if it is sensitive across that newer sit. And that's where on-demand classification can help you.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. Not only whether it's not scanned, but for items that are scanned, are you actually scanning against the newest, right,
That's right.
sets, right? Or
For files that
custom,
are untouched, right?
right, exactly. So that's the identify. So, we talk a lot about discover, protect, and monitor. We have and govern, sorry, discover, protect, and govern. We have to discover what's actually inside the content. All right, so we're talking about protect here, and we did cover this a little bit in our previous sessions, but we run through this oversharing report, and we have identified so many sites that we need to fix for oversharing, but we have to contact for number one, the site owners, and for them to take action. But in the meantime, there are options for you to limit Microsoft 365 Copilot access to content in this site. And the first way is to restrict by sensitivity label. So that is the DLP policy that we spoke about, right, in our first session, which is DLP for Copilot. So this is based on the sensitivity label that is applied to the content. So it's more granular, it's on an item level. So we can say, Copilot, do not process any content that is labeled with, and then you select, for example, highly confidential.
Yeah, and what I love about these screens is, for the admins following us today on this this call, when you think of, wait, this is sensitivity labeled, this is data loss prevention, this is insider risk, you're right. And what I love about this screen is it's bringing it all together from one lens of data security. So first of all, prioritizing the sites that are most at risk and the quick, easy action. So yes, it existed today through multiple controls, but it brings it all in one place. Easy way for you to go and configure from that one place if you want to tackle more on the sensitivity label or the DLP protection aspect.
Exactly. So what you're seeing here is the setting in my DLP policy. So I have chosen the sensitivity label Obsidian merger. It's a very important merger. I do not want Copilot to process it, and I've chosen to prevent Copilot from processing any content with the label Obsidian merger. And so what will happen is that if you ask Copilot to summarize any document that's labeled with this sensitivity label, or ask a question where it would potentially reference a document labeled with Obsidian merger, it will say, I found a document, because this is a block processing DLP policy, not a block search. It will say that I have found a document because you have access to it. However, I cannot access the content in there to process or respond due to the DLP policy that is in place.
And that awesome call out, I think, advantage that we get here in context of M365 Copilot and Purview together, and also doesn't require encryption, right? So we discussed here earlier where you could have a label that says, I'm going to encrypt and restrict who has access. Now in context here, I have access, and really just blocking Copilot from using it. So it's a really cool feature.
Exactly. It doesn't block productivity, but at the same time, it can prevent processing of those content by Copilot. All right, so the second option is on a site level, so you can restrict Copilot from accessing all content from this specific sales and marketing site through SharePoint Advanced Management restricted content discovery. So there is information directly in DSPM for AI on how to do that to set up restricted content discovery, or RCD, with SAM. All right, so those are ways for you. In the meantime, sometimes we call stop the bleeding, right? Just making sure Copilot doesn't have access to all those sensitive information before you now work your way on actually setting up the sensitivity labels, right, Max?
Yep. Yeah.
Good call. So you talked a little bit earlier, right, about the site level sensitivity labels and the file sensitivity labels. So here in DSPM for AI, we recommend, you set up first a default sensitivity label for SharePoint document library if they all contain, the same types of content. You can have default labels for all content in your environment. You can also set up auto labeling policy to automatically label that matches specific sits, as well as you mentioned, right, a site level sensitivity label for your sites.
Yeah, that's right. And think of it as a funnel effect a little bit of what we do on protection. So we've addressed or identified the riskiest sites through the screen. Now we have some measures we can put in place saying, well, we want to apply this protection. We're removing access, we're reducing access, and then all the way down to protecting file by file. And again, whether that label applies encryption or not, we have different means as we discussed. So it's a really good way of looking at this. How do I start, addressing the core oversharing all the way down to being extremely specific at the end with auto labeling with sits?
Yeah. And we will call out, there is labeled in that little red box there where you can actually view the items that has files with sensitive info types. So if you click on that, that will take you to Data Explorer within Purview, and that will list out all the files on that site, as well as what sits is contained within those files, which sensitivity labels are applied to those files, and whether there were trainable classifiers files that matched to those files. So a call out there that you can also dig a little bit deeper to look at the files that are on the site that contain sets.
And of course, this is for admins with the permissions we described. This is a high privilege area, of course.
Exactly. But last but not least, we also recommend you to review unused files. So this is all about reducing your surface for oversharing, right? The less content you have, then the less surface area for oversharing. And also this will also improve your Copilot responses. So looking at potentially creating a retention policy from Purview Data Lifecycle Management to look at redundant, obsolete, or transitory data. And again, retaining and or deleting content based on the regulations that apply to your organization.
Very easy to create.
Yes. So that is the protect. And the last screen here is the monitor. So, you've done everything to discover, to protect, and now we ask that you will want to continuously monitor and improve on your permissioning stance, because this report is a slice in time, right? So we're looking at currently what is happening, but as you know, organization evolve, things happen, people move around. So making sure that you run a SharePoint Advanced Management site access review to make sure that the people who have access to those files are reviewed, and they should have access to those files. And then also Microsoft Entra access review to make sure that people who have access to certain resources such as sites and groups, they're supposed to have those access as well.
And they're both tools are purpose built. So from a SharePoint specific standpoint versus Entra, they have great capabilities as well to, as you mentioned, continuously review this. So when we think of these, we've again addressed the priorities that we have to start on leveraging Copilot. But then at the same time, you want to make this make sure that these top sites, if you're setting up policies in place, you're training people. Sometimes it's just informing the right managers of these teams to do better. That way you can continuously review if those actions are taken.
Perfect. So that is a run through of our DSPM for AI data risk assessment. We do have a full blueprint that includes Purview functionalities as well as SharePoint Advanced Management functionalities to address internal oversharing when you deploy Microsoft 365 Copilot. So be sure to check out our blueprint, and I will very quickly show that you will get access to a downloadable blueprint that has step-by-step guidance on how you can address internal oversharing concerns.
I highly suggest clicking, or well, can't click, I guess, but getting that link on top, right?
Yes.
Take the QR code, picture quick. It's picture time. But not only is the blueprint downloadable, but it's attached with a complete detailed guide, both for E3 and E5, just to understand what are the capabilities available to you and the step-by-step guidance.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to shift gears. So we talked about, before or while you're deploying Microsoft 365 Copilot, how can you discover and address those oversharing concerns. So now we've addressed those, we've discovered them, and we're now ready to actually discover and protect and govern the Microsoft 365 Copilot interactions. So we covered pieces of this in our previous two sessions, so we really want to link it all together for you. So you're going to hear discover, protect, and govern. And so the first step is, what are the features or the solutions or the policies that you can discover Microsoft 365 Copilot interactions? So number one, you want to make sure you turn your Purview audit on. Number two, create the insider risk management to detect risky interactions in AI apps. And then from communication compliance, set up the policy to detect unethical behavior in AI. So those are all your detection discover policies. So with Microsoft Audit, it's usually turned on by default for your tenant, but if it hasn't been turned on, you can always go to the landing page of DSPM for AI in the Get Started page and click on Activate Microsoft Purview Audit. This will ensure your Microsoft 365 Copilot interactions and prompts and responses are logged. And this is the Detect Risky Interactions in AI applications. This can be accessed through your recommendations panel in DSPM for AI, and you can quickly create that policy directly here in DSPM for AI. And last but not least, you will also see this recommendation in the recommendation panel, which is the policy to detect unethical behavior in your AI applications. So once you've turned on these discovering policies, you are then able to go to the reporting tab in DSPM for AI to see all of these interactions. So includes total interactions, the sensitive information, insensitive interactions with M365 Copilot, whether there's unethical AI interactions happening, what are the top sensitive label referenced, insider risk severity. So those are your user risk per AI app, and again, potential risky AI usage. So all of these information is available in the reports section of DSPM for AI. And you can filter that to Microsoft Copilot experiences to look at the interactions with Microsoft Copilot. So lots of full data here. Right, Max? And I'll call out one thing. So here in the top sensitivity label reference in Copilot, this is where you can look at, do I want to set up a DLP policy, right? DLP for Copilot. So I see Copilot is referencing a lot of content of Project Obsidian, and perhaps that is something I do not want Copilot to process. So this will give you that information to say, perhaps I would want to, as a recommendation, set up a DLP policy there.
Yeah, and I was going to call out, I mean, you make it sound very simple, and it is. Like, it is that easy to install and get feedback very quickly in your environment. So do recommend that.
Yeah, and this is the user risk. So we are going to talk a little bit in a bit, but these user risks levels can help you with the use of adaptive protection, identify where you may want to set up, blocking, right, based on the user risk that is interacting with your AI applications. All right, so you have reporting, and then you also have Activity Explorer for Microsoft 365 Copilot interactions. So that includes the AI interaction itself, as well as where sensitive info types are detected in that interaction. So there are two separate interaction line items here, and I'll move to this slide so you can see. So with Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is that AI app category that you can select, you can see all the AI interactions that you've had, your end user has had with Microsoft 365 Copilot. You can also see directly here where the interaction happened. So did it happen in Office? Did it happen in a web chat? Did it happen in biz chat? When did it happen? Who was the user? And what kind of sensitive info was detected in that interaction? So lots of information here. And then if you click into each interaction, you can find out more information about this interaction, including the sensitive info types that was detected in that interaction. So here you can see I've got diseases, legal affairs, and finance detected in this specific interaction. And if you have the right permission, you can also see the prompts and/or response of that interaction directly in DSPM for AI. So you will need the Content Explorer Content Viewer permission role group to see the prompts and responses. All right, protecting Microsoft 365 Copilot. So we talked about discovering the interactions. So to protect Microsoft 365 Copilot, obviously we talked through the oversharing as well, the importance of having sensitivity labels. So same thing, because Microsoft 365 Copilot respects and honors and inherits your sensitivity label on your files, we would recommend you to protect all your data with sensitivity labels. And then data loss prevention, protect sensitive data reference in Microsoft 365 Copilot. So protecting your data with sensitivity label, and this is because this is a little bit of a recap. It's because Copilot inherits the sensitivity label of the referenced file, as well as it honors the access control restrictions on the labeled content, so that when you ask a question to Copilot, it will reference the sensitivity label and making sure that if it creates a new document based on what you asked, it will also inherit the highest level sensitivity label for your content. Anything else you want to add there, Max?
No, it's a good recap of some of the previous session, but yes, deep dives are available as well from the previous 2 weeks if you want to dig deeper in there.
Perfect.
It's great integration across just Purview, just again from having a sensitivity label and making sure that all your content is protected. And this is just a new type of content, if I could put it this way.
Yes. And so again, we talked about this in the oversharing, but as an ongoing basis, you may want to make sure that you're protecting your data by setting up the DLP policy based on what you're seeing, right? So again, if you're seeing Project Obsidian as a top sensitive label that's referenced, you may want to set up the same DLP for Copilot policy, so that again, Copilot will not be able to process the content that's labeled with that sensitivity label. All right, so that was protect. So your protect is essentially your MIP, DLP, and IRM. And then on the govern side, this is your data compliance solutions. So we have communication compliance, where we get guided assistance to AI regulations. We have communication compliance, which will detect unethical behavior in AI. We have data lifecycle management, where you can set up retention policy to retain or delete those interactions with Microsoft 365 Copilot. And then last but not least, with e-discovery, you can create an e-discovery case to preserve, collect, analyze, review, and export all of those interactions. So when we talk about discover, protect, and govern, right, we discover using DSPM for AI, as well as audit. And then we protect using MIP and DLP, and now we can govern with the data compliance solution. So yeah.
And end-to-end integration, right? So
exactly.
Comes for all solutions we have in Purview almost.
Exactly. And so again, we're back in that recommendation panel, and this is where all of the policies that you can create to discover, protect, and govern all AI are here, right? So not just Microsoft 365 Copilot, but also enterprise AI and other AI. And you'll get your CM, so compliance manager for AI. And this cover all of these AI regulations. You will have your communication compliance policy to detect Microsoft Copilot interactions with where protected materials and potential jailbreaking happened. And with retention policies, you can set up a retention policy to retain or delete Copilot interactions. And e-discovery, where you can search for content where it contains Copilot activity, so that you can create a case to investigate your Copilot interactions. All right, that was a whirlwind tour of how we secure Microsoft 365 Copilot. I will call out that this is blogged in detail in our DSPM for AI blog. So feel free to reference that and look through. But really the key idea that I really want to cover is that Purview secures AI across Microsoft Copilot experiences, enterprise AI, and other AI. And we do that by discovering, protecting, and then governing. So we're not going to cover this in detail. However, we do have a blog that goes into full detail into how you discover and govern ChatGTP Enterprise. So feel free to check out this AKA link that we will throw in the chat for you as well. So this talks about very similar, right? It's the same story as Microsoft 365 Copilot. You can use our tools to discover and then govern ChatGTP Enterprise. So you can discover that through a collection policy, and you can govern that using the same communication compliance, e-discovery, data lifecycle management. And then let's do a recap, Max, on other AI. So we covered how to secure Microsoft 365 Copilot, right? Discover, protect, and govern. There's the blog post for a little bit of a reading on how you can discover and govern ChatGPT Enterprise. So, and the last piece is on the other AI applications. So again, these are the consumer AI applications that you access through the browser, and how we can discover and protect those interactions.
Yeah, that goes back to one of the initial slides when you think of the patterns to protect, right? So first party, of course, there's a lot of options. There's more visibility in M365 Copilot, more protections available. And now we'll look at how can you help yourself either completely block or just control, audit, see what's happening with the use of other AIs.
Exactly. All right. So this is, you're going to start to see the theme come back, right? How do we discover? How do we protect? And so with other AI interactions, that's through the browser. This is why we ask you need to install Microsoft Purview browser extension, onboard your devices to Microsoft Purview, and then we can then create DLP policies to extend your insight for data discovery. So again, this is browser-based, and hence you need to install browser extension. So we're back at DSPM for AI's landing page. So this is the overview page, and you have your get started tasks. So the first task was activated Microsoft Purview, and that's for Microsoft Copilot experiences. Those are your Microsoft 365 Copilot. And then the three underneath are all for securing and discovering other AI apps. So the first one is to install Microsoft browser extension. We talked a little about this in our first session. So again, just to recap, if you're a Windows user, install it for your Edge browser, for your Chrome browser. For Mac OS, you do not need to install this browser extension. So I think that's right. So Windows, install.
Yeah.
Mac,
no, that's a great call out again. And I think of, for users of Endpoint DLP that have not installed for Edge, yes, we're saying you should install it to get the benefits of all the signals. So there is an addition in context here just for you Edge users already. Yes, you should install it.
Yes, because the IRM part, the insider risk management part, still needs the plugin to get the insights from your Edge browser. Yes, and then you would need to onboard your devices to Microsoft Purview. And then last but not least, you want to go ahead, and these are one-click policies, right? So you can just go ahead and click that create policy button if you haven't created already, and extend your insights for data discovery. This will create DLP policies. Again, this is in detection mode, meaning it's not yet. We're going to talk about blocking and protection later, but the first step is just to discover, right? Detect when users visit AI sites. Detect when sensitive info is pasted or uploaded to AI sites. So we're not blocking them from, copying and pasting or uploading sensitive info to AI sites yet, but these are detection policies, so you can have that visibility into what is happening with your end users and other AI.
I think a good call out just also for customers listening in that don't have Endpoint DLP deployed today. There's a simple process to get devices onboarded, and it can work. So even if you're not going in and enforce for Endpoint DLP, it is the same agent across on Windows. It does work with other agents from other vendors. So if you have a different antivirus or EDR solution, it does work hand in hand. So again, very simple solution in case. And even if you have another DLP, right? So if you just want to get visibility, it's something that can be worked together. Get your teams involved for helping on deployment. But simple steps just to get visibility.
Exactly. All right. So once you've done all of that, right, installed your plugin, onboarded your devices, and created the detection policy, you are then able to see reporting for other AI interactions. So it's very similar to the Microsoft 365 Copilot, but you have it focused on obviously other AI applications. You have your total visits to other AI, which AI application did they visit? Is it ChatGPT? Is it DeepSeek? Is it Google Gemini? And then the total interactions over time, as well as what are the sensitive information that is being shared to ChatGPT, to Google Gemini, if any, and what kind of sits, right? So are they sharing SIN numbers? Are they sharing financial data there? And then on the user side, same thing. We help with those detection policies. We can detect the user risks that are having interaction with those AI apps. So how much of your users, how much of your high risk users are interacting with those AI apps. And we'll talk in the protection piece. We'll utilize these signals to decide, should we go ahead and block those users from interacting with other AI applications.
Totally in the realm of insider risk management. And I'd love to say, like, the call out is for the benefit you get across the platform. Think of it as the risk will be determined on the numbers and the types of activity. If you're users trying to obfuscate content or naming content and trying to send it, downgrade labels, and all of these types of triggers that can be used. So really a good, quick way to understand if there is an appropriate use of sensitive information in your environment.
Mm-hmm. And so that was reports. And then the Activity Explorer tab for other AI interaction includes whether there was a visit to AI, so that's the IRM policy. And then if there was a DLP rule match, which was detected that sensitive information was copy and pasted or uploaded to those AI websites. So here in Activity Explorer, you can filter AI app category to other AI apps, and you will see DLP rule match and AI website visits, if there are any in your tenant for your users.
Yeah, that's a great use. One thing to call out for Activity Explorer is that place to go, especially for admins, to go back and look what policy should they make, right? So what kind of uses is being done across anything. So for today, AI, but think of it as it's a helper to identify how things are being used for you to craft additional policies.
Exactly. So with AI website visit, you will be able to see which website did that user visit. So this one is a browse to a specific URL, and this user here, user 2701, went to cloud. When did that happen? And as well as the IP address. And for DLP rule match, this is where that user potentially copy or pasted or uploaded information, sensitive information to the website. So we can see what kind of sensitive information what kind of sets, what was uploaded or copy and pasted to those other AI sites. All right, so that's on Discover. So for Protect, again, this is all about adaptive protection. So back in the recommendations, where we have all of the policies that we recommend you create to secure and govern your AI applications, there is one called Fortify Your Data Security. And this is now a blocking policy, right? So in the Get Started, that was a detection endpoint DLP plus policy. And now this one is the one where we're actually going to go ahead and block. So number one, we can block elevated risk users from pasting or uploading sensitive information to AI website. Or what you're seeing here on the bottom is our browser data security, which is we can block elevated risk users from submitting prompts to AI apps in Microsoft Edge. So this is right beyond that detection mode, we're actively going to block the prompts from being sent to other AI websites. All right. So here's a summary of everything
that was a lot
today. So there's two separate stories, really, Max, that we covered today, right? So the first story is Microsoft Purview, right? We have our data security, data compliance, and data governance solution. And within those solutions, we have features that can help you to discover, protect, and govern AI application across Microsoft Copilot experiences, enterprise AI applications, and other AI, consumer AI websites that you access through the browser. And so it's the same story of discover, protect, and govern using the same solutions, right? Discover with audit, protect using MIP, DLP, and IRM, and governing using CC, DLM, e-discovery, and compliance manager, right? So whether that's other AI, whether that's your ChatGPT Enterprise or Microsoft 365 Copilot, or now in public preview Security Copilot, or down the road we'll have more copilots that we support. We discover, protect, and govern with those same solutions that we know and love. So that's one story. And then the second story is when you're deploying or thinking about deploying Microsoft 365 Copilot and you're concerned about oversharing that may have already happened in your tenant, so in your SharePoint sites or OneDrive. DSPM for AI's data risk assessment can help you identify, right, and then remediate those oversharing concerns.
I think that a great call out here is if you have Purview today already in place for some of it, it's okay. You can start using quickly the other one just for the lens of AI and get used to the new capabilities there just for AI interaction. So it's a great way to expand on the value that you already have. It's a quicker win. If one of the call that we had a couple of weeks ago, we said AI, the risk in AI wasn't there 2 years ago, right? So this is completely new, net new value that you have as part of Purview.
Yes, absolutely, right. We're essentially extending the location or the scope of Purview to be beyond Microsoft 365, like as a tenant, right, to now your AI interactions. So a few resources that we would love to share with you and call out. So be sure, if you're interested, join our Customer Connection program. This allows you to get access to our private preview features, solutions, and in return, we would love your feedback for these solutions to help improve them. So sign up today. We put the link in the chat for you. A great program. And then some additional resources. So lots of these links are already shared in the chat with you. So a few things, we do have an official Learn Doc on how you can utilize data security and protections for AI with Microsoft Purview. Join our CCP. There's some guidance, right? The 2 blogs that we mentioned, one for how to deploy DSPM for AI, and then the second one is how to use Purview data risk assessment to address your oversharing concerns. And then this is Max. This one, it's all about how you can accelerate your information protection. So we talked a lot about, label your content, set up your sensitivity label. This blueprint, do you want to talk just quickly about that?
Very quickly, because I think we're at time, is essentially it's a method to help you get to a secure by default approach on labeling, really reshape based on protection rather than just classification only. So really good to read on accelerating your overall mid deployment.
Yes. Thank you, Max. And that concludes our third and last session on securing and governing AI with Microsoft Purview. We really enjoyed chatting with you and listening to your feedback. Feel free to continue the conversation in the chat. We will check that out afterwards. But thank you again for joining us.
Yes, thank you.